and for City Council for hosting us here. Apparently, I'm permitted to use Council President Hardin's gavel, which feels slightly weird, but I just did it, and Trudy's proud of me. So a couple just introductory remarks. I think since the last meeting, obviously, we've all had a bit to think about and a bit to digest, and I think everyone is anxious to get into the meat of what we're here to do. So I want to thank the county and the city, first of all, for coming and presenting the situation in both bodies today. It's, I think, extremely helpful to us that you're here, and appreciate the time and effort that's been put into giving us a real quick 101 on what's going on. So thank you for that. A couple asks that I would have is this. We are in a situation where I know we all want to understand better where we might be headed in the future, and we are absolutely going to get there. My ask today is that we use the time of our city and county presenters wisely and really listen and ask questions related to the current situation. And the reason is we will get to options and potential solutions later, but today, since we have a pretty truncated opportunity to learn about the status, we want to try and focus on truly understanding what we can in this time. So I would ask that you have your questions be oriented towards that. The second thing is we're going to try some little technology here, which is quite fun. So there's a QR code here that is for a program called Slido, and what it is, basically, you can try it, it's really easy. If you pull up the QR code, it will give you an opportunity to type your question in, and that's in order to allow you to ask questions so we can consolidate them during the presentation, but we won't be interrupting the presenters. So I certainly would encourage you to use that. All of those questions that you may have during these presentations, if you type them in, will actually go to Marshall, and he's going to consolidate things so that when we reach the Q&A portion of the presentation, we might be able to find some commonalities and combine those questions. Obviously, if you have a burning question during Q&A, it's fine to ask it as well. But the reason for doing it that way is, A, you don't have to remember to the end, and B, we would like to be able to allow them to present all the way through without interrupting for questions. So hopefully everybody's okay with that method of doing things. And I think that is everything I have for now. Are there any other administrative or setup questions before we turn things over? Okay, well, thank you for being here. We'll turn things over to the county and ask you to get started, and we'll go from there. Oh, I'm sorry, one last thing, the mics, I forgot. These mics are not the same as we had last time where they come on automatically. If you do need a mic later on today, you just have to press the button to turn it green and then press it off for when you're done. Thank you.
Administrative note for everybody. Restrooms are just outside this room.
Joy wanted to know. Just so you know.
But it's important. Yes. So if anyone has to use the restroom, just outside council chambers, men's restroom to the left, women's restroom to the right. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zach Telerik, and I'm the director of the Franklin County Office of Management and Budget, and I'm here today to provide an overview of the county finances. And I think on the slideshow, the county's all-funds budget is just around $2.2 billion. Of that, about 40% is allocated to social and human services. Listed on the pie chart on the screen are the four of those largest agencies: the Board of Developmental Disabilities, Franklin County Children's Services, the Alcohol, Drug, and Mental Health, or ADAM-H Board, and the Franklin County Office on Aging. These four agencies comprise nearly 1/3 of the county's budget. Support for these agencies comes from the collection of nearly $535 million in property tax levies that have been approved by the county's voters. I believe that in the packet today, Marshall included the schedule of the human service levies of when they plan to go on the ballot when their current levies expire. When it comes time for those agencies to be on the ballot, a request is made to the Board of Commissioners, who then forward the request to the Human Services Levy Review Committee. This is a 7-person committee that was created to review the levy requests, evaluate potential levy impact, provide recommendations regarding levy rates and duration, evaluate agency program performance on voted levy objectives, and conduct ongoing financial reviews of levy-funded social service agencies. The property tax is one of three main revenue sources that can be set by the Board of Commissioners. Along with the county sales tax and the real estate conveyance fee, these sources make up just over 1/2 of the county's revenue. The next largest component of the overall budget revenue comes from state and federal sources. And this is the primary source of funding that supports the operations of Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services. While the largest component of the all funds budget is related to social and human services, the largest component of the county's general fund is directed towards justice and public safety. However, the general fund does provide support for social and human services through the county's community partnership program, as well as the work of the Veteran Service Commission. In addition, the general fund is the primary source of funding for the county's support of travel and tourism, as well as the cultural arts. As you can see on this chart, 62% of the revenue, or almost $414 million, is from the collection of the county's sales tax. During 2024, sales tax collections remained relatively flat. Based on the forecast of retail sales that we received from Moody's Analytics, we are expecting an increase of approximately 3% in the current year. However, much of this revenue growth is expected to be offset by a decline in investment earnings, which are expected to be negatively impacted by the Federal Reserve lowering rates and the expenditure of remaining one-time federal assistance received from the federal government during the pandemic. During the pandemic, the county received $430 million in federal support. Initially, this included $76 million from the CARES Act under the Coronavirus Relief Fund, along with $8 million from FEMA. With the American Rescue Plan, the county received nearly $256 million from the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, which was fully obligated by the deadline of December 31st, 2024, and $89 million in emergency rental assistance, which will be fully expended before the September 30th, 2025 deadline. Through the end of 2024, the county utilized more than 85% of this funding, which was used to help provide rental, food, employment, and other assistance, while also avoiding the need to utilize cash reserves. As the primary provider of social and human services, county agencies have been able to increase their support to the community over the last 6 years, with support ranging from $400 million to $600 million annually. In addition to the federal resources during this time period, voters approved an increase to the Adam H. levy in 2020 that allowed for increased investments and the construction of the soon-to-be-opened Crisis Care Center. Increases in expenditure are also being driven by a decrease in the Federal Medical Assistance Percentage, or FMAP, which is the formula that determines how much federal funding is provided for Medicaid programs. This percentage was enhanced during the pandemic, which offset expenditures for the Medicaid match that the Board of Developmental Disabilities provides to their clients. I also want to point out that the numbers in the chart, which sum up to $3.3 billion, only include the social services support to residents and grants to nonprofits. It does not include the amount expended on the over 2,000 county employees who work across these health and human service agencies. Under travel and tourism, the county's primary support goes to Experience Columbus, the Greater Columbus Sports Commission, and support to the Convention Facilities Authority for Nationwide Arena. The ARPA funding that was provided includes support to the Columbus Clippers in Huntington Park to maintain ballpark operations during the pandemic, as well as support for upgrades to the convention center. The main support for cultural arts is through our Community Partnerships Program with a grant to the Greater Columbus Arts Council, including the increase of support from $2 million to $4 million a year in 2020. The ARPA funding on the chart in 2024 was used for capital support to the Columbus Museum of Art as part of their roof replacement project. And with that, that will conclude my presentation, and I believe I will be turning it over to Auditor Kilgore.
Good morning. Marshall, would you pass these out? Thank you. Just because we're on smaller screens this morning, we're going to pass out a packet. We kind of pivoted quickly and put together some information, but it'll be easier, I think, for you to see right in front of you. Thank you, sir. So really my goal today is not to provide an absolute or overwhelm you with information, but instead give you a little bit of an appetizer as to the city's overall revenue structure and maybe help elicit some really good kind of themes and some good questions. But let me just wait for these to be dropped real quick. You know, I'll point out, just because we might go to some experts for during Q&A, Darlene Wilds, the deputy auditor, is right in the back, as is Rashida Hansard. Rashida oversees the division of tax, which is where admissions and short-term rentals and hotel motel taxes are collected. And next to her is Sue Odenweller, who is our head of financial reporting. So we might go to some experts as we get into this. Thank you very much, Marshall and Elon. Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and kind of dive in here. Good to go? Okay. My first thing that I really want to address is, and kind of making this correlation to your worlds, we have very different total addressable markets. And so, for example, when we're talking about the county, it's the county's population. When we're talking about our income tax, that's also largely regional because it's individuals who are coming in to work in the city of Columbus. Income tax is paid where you actually work. And so, for example, you know, when we look at Columbus income levels, we also have to consider that a lot of people who are driving in from New Albany or from Dublin or from anywhere else in central Ohio, they may very well be working in the city of Columbus. So our kind of addressable market for income tax is very much regional. Our utilities are also regional. In fact, I think we're up to 26, 27 municipalities where we provide water and sewer. And so it's much, much larger than just the core city of Columbus, but it can be complicated because if you look at just the city demographics, it doesn't always, we really have to look at overall demographics to the region. So you'll see I kind of go back and forth a little bit with the types of information and the types of data that we're going to be using. But first off, just to kind of set the stage for today, I want to spend the most time giving you an overview of really 4 sources of revenue. Because the middle section, which are our utility revenues, they're largely self-supporting entities. For example, the water bills that any of you pay for the city of Columbus, that goes back just to water. It does not come to the general fund, and it is not able to support other things. And so I'm really just going to focus on the income tax, which is our primary source of revenue for our general fund, as well as the other sources of revenue, the admissions, the short-term rental taxes, and the hotel motel taxes that you all know go to some of the causes that you're very familiar with. So focusing, really first on just a pie chart, an overview of the general fund. Income tax represents about 81% of our total piece of the general fund pie. Now, on the surface, especially those of you who are in business, you would say, well, you're materially reliant upon a single source of revenue. For us, it's really the composition of our employers. One of the most important things for us to look at is the diversity and the types of employers that feed into our local economy. And because, unlike a lot of our colleagues around, our brethren across the nation, we're not a single employer. We're not even a major 5 or 10 employer town. We have a lot of comfort in that diversification. And so historically, I think income tax was put into place, believe it or not, Columbus was the second in the nation to have an income tax. Toledo, Ohio was the first. I think we got ours in 48. And it was really intentional. And I love this. It was really a very, very intentional decision. And it was made with the acknowledgement that our bedrock, think about our education, our government, the nonprofits, the healthcare, these ecosystems have historically been very, very stable. And the fact that our primary source of revenue was intentionally designed to be around income tax has been very, very fortuitous for us as a community. Our greatest kind of opportunity is really looking at that diversification and looking at ways to optimize our economy. And I'll spend a little bit more time on that here in a couple of slides. The other revenues are really from like an ancillary perspective. They're important, but they're not ones that we actively work to try and, focus on. We really, don't grow. Director Long will speak a little bit more to kind of the expenditures, but for example, we have not increased our property tax since 1956, and that's by design. That was very, very intentional. Just to direct you into this packet, the revenue data here, take a look at the page labeled General Fund Revenue and Expenditure Categories. It's just on page 2. And you'll see, the last, since we've really focused just on data since 2018. Anything beyond that, and I think most of you recognize, we were a very different city. And so while it's nice to go back kind of historically, anything before that for me is really, we're a very different city. Our population changes, our demographic changes, the types of jobs that we have. And so we really just focused on a couple of years before COVID through present. And so you'll see, for example, we've maintained around high 70s to low 80s for income tax. And Director Long will speak more to the expenditure side below as well. But you'll note, I just want to point out for purposes of your clarification, the first column, 2024, you'll note public safety looks low at 47%. That is because of a one-time infusion of some coronavirus monies. And so it's about 2/3. You'll see footnote 3. I just want to point that out. It's kind of a frequently asked question we get. So this is just kind of a landscape. General fund, relatively stable. And I do want to move into more on income tax. Income tax, well, let me mention one thing. Rainy day fund, you'll notice if you go to the second page here, right after on this kind of the FRAC data, go to the page labeled Statement of Revenues and Expenditures, Changes in Fund Balances. You're going to see, again, a nice 7-year history of the general fund revenues. But I do want to point out at the bottom, there are some different buckets. We use, for example, the rainy day fund, which is listed below, called economic stabilization. The idea of like a rainy day fund for governments, it's not even, I please don't define it as like a safety net. It's not a savings account even. For a government to enter the rainy day fund, it's kind of like entering your 401k. It is something that sets off warning signs to everyone, and it's a place of last resort. We have a healthy rainy day fund. We've contributed to it. Industry standard says you should aim for about 10% of your expenditures. Ours hovers close to that, but it's something that has been a really important safety net and but it's not something that we enter lightly. The last time we entered it was in 2009, and in fact, when we set it up in, I think it was 1988, we've only had to enter it after, I believe, 6 separate times, but only after periods of serious economic distress. The city of Columbus, fortunately, and Trudy, you've been through a lot of the different iterations economically, we tend to go into economic distress slowly, and we come out slowly, and that's because of our diversity. It's not like the ups and downs that you might see and Jason knows, with some communities that are very singularly reliant upon like a tourism tax or something like that. We really do ebb and flow. Our employers are slow to kind of, we see that adjust, and it's very fortunate for us, but duration has always been our challenge. So for example, after the fiscal crises, after the double dip recession, we have, a year, we have a few months, we can kind of tighten our belts. We have a year and a half, we're really eliminating a lot of services. That's when you'll see us have to make those decisions. But we take a lot of management pride in having a kind of tried and true. We've got a lot of tested practices from a lot of years. So income tax collections on the whole, if you were to look at this and just kind of put over top, just imagine population growth, they have a very similar trend line. Income tax is 2.5% flat. If you're a business net profits, your individual, any of you who work in the city of Columbus and you have your wages, every 2 weeks you get paid, 2.5% comes to us. Historically, our income tax collections have absolutely followed the population kind of line. And that means very simply more people with more jobs, more collections. A couple of things that I do want to kind of acknowledge is that and I'll show you a chart here. What lies behind these numbers is really where I think the magic is. And what I mean by that is how do we look at this and not just recognize that these are individuals, but we have a really good look every 2 weeks when people get paid. We kind of understand, and this is through a lot of modernization. Many of you know my predecessor. He was not one for a lot of technology, did not have a cell phone, but we've had a lot of fun modernizing, and we're now at a place where, because of the investments, we have revenue analytics comparable to a Fortune 1000. And it is absolutely splendid, but it's incredible to be able to see about every 2 weeks how people are working. And we can actually kind of back up a lot of that data with understanding who has gained employment, who has maintained, who is perpetually underemployed. And we're able to really support a lot of that knowledge by looking at places with partners like Huntington, where we're able to understand what is credit usage like, how are people going through savings, how are people paying for basic goods. And so using a lot of disparate sets of data, we've tried to become much better at economic storytelling. And so, really, Chair, as this kind of continues and your mission statement aligns, I would love for you to come back with questions, because I think we can really put together some visions that will help kind of you see the picture of Columbus as individuals and how our workers are actually faring. So let me share with you a little bit on an income tax, just for a little bit more data. If you go to the next page, this will be the page titled Income Tax Revenue by Payer Type. You'll see this detail. And I guess I would, just kind of acknowledge on this screen, you'll see a little bit of a dip. That is, of course, the early part of COVID. By way of context, we were very fortunate to enter COVID the way that we did. We entered in 2019 with a fantastic place. We entered a really, really strong footing. And so the decrease, we look kind of like a Nike swoosh. Just think about that emblem. When COVID first hit, we had a rapid decline as a result of shutdown and the fact that jobs tied to income tax, people could not work, quick decline. But factually, we had a very rapid incline as a result of many of you in this room being able to work differently. So you pivoted. Healthcare is our bedrock, but you were able to keep Ohio State, keep people working, keep people, in positions, helping people regain employment, and we quickly saw that rebound. And we've just steadily kind of increased as a result of largely more people, more jobs. So let me spend maybe just a little bit of time. I want to share with you, just to kind of give you a kind of appetizer of what we really study, a lot of different trends. The things that I think you might be most interested in is really understanding how our job landscape actually is presenting itself in our income tax revenues. And what I mean by that is I want to turn, I believe, to the next page on your deck. And this is going to be, you'll see kind of a blue header. We threw this together quickly. I'm sorry I didn't have the time to put titles and page numbers on this. This is something that I look at all the time. It is incredible data, but it's also probably the best way to understand why, I'm constantly talking with Kenny McDonald and constantly talking with folks who are trying to build the jobs in Columbus. And it's because the job composition, let me put it this way, we're at a point now where we can absolutely quantify the quality of our jobs. Yeah, just take that in. We can absolutely quantify. And I want to just share with you, there is something so powerful about our economic setup here. The fact that we are income tax driven, it's almost this omnipotent, it's like romantically, we can create the economy, we can create the city to which we really aspire by making thoughtful investments in things that ultimately grow the well-being of our residents of this area. And I'll give you a very simple example. A few years ago, Rachel Lustig, who was then the CEO of Catholic Social Services, she and I partnered on she's brilliant. We partnered on this really interesting kind of pilot that she had an idea was worth looking at, because she noticed a number of people were dropping out of Columbus State. And they were doing so because, $800, someone's furnace broke, a $1,000 hit because a car, broke down. And for that individual, a student at Columbus State, that was enough to make them drop out, right? And she had an idea about if we were to keep them enrolled, what that would do for their long-term well-being. And she came to me, we worked out a lot of stuff and some models and honestly, like back of the envelope numbers. And I knew it would be powerful, but I underestimated just how powerful it would be. But basically, just think about this. We're an income tax-driven city. If we're able to keep that individual from a position of a high school, degree, GED, into an associate's, think about that upward movement. Joy knows that really, really well. There's the moral obligation, of course, of education, but there's also a business case. And my estimate at the time was like it might be 5 years before, hypothetically, we got a grant. She earned an incredible grant from the University of Notre Dame to do this and track individuals' economic mobility. But just hypothetically, if the city of Columbus or others were to invest, how long would it take for us to recoup our investment in the area of upward income? And the back of the envelope answer was about 3 years. We broke even in 2. 3 years was when it turned an ROI. And just think about that. I mean, each of you understand, the opportunity there. And so I'd asked this committee, and we can talk more about this as you really kind of peel back and get under the hood and stuff. But this is where I spend most of my time, and I'm really, really motivated by the policies that, frankly, council can put forth that will help increase our economic stability in the years to come. So let me kind of point out, I want to, kind of just look at this kind of chart with you. And the reason, there's a lot of data on here, but let's take a peek. It's this one again with kind of the blue header. I just want to point out that we like to start at 2019 and then work our way through COVID. And you'll see, for example, total job count. Now, this is just City of Columbus. So about 580,000 jobs at the end of 2019, and you'll see them organized by, we call it the NAICS code. It's industry sector, left-hand side, and then you'll kind of work your way over. So in 2020, we had about 4.3% down. We had a rebound as you entered 2021, and then we, of course, rebounded even more in 2022. And then you can see kind of in 2024, we're just slowing down a little bit, but sectors are changing. And any of you who are working right now and working on projects in the region, you probably feel this. You probably see this in some of the numbers that even you're lending, those of you in banking, like you probably kind of feel this. And so I hope this maybe kind of validates some of the things that you're seeing. What I will say is that 2 things. One, healthcare is our foundation. Healthcare is our bedrock. But for healthcare, and Ohio State was a savior for us during the pandemic, but healthcare every year has grown in jobs. They have really kept lifting our economic numbers to a very healthy degree. And it's allowed for movement in other sectors, if you will. The second thing that I really want to try and express is that all jobs are not created equal. I really want to hit on that quite a bit because our tax base, our income tax collections are not a reflection of how our individual population is actually doing. And I'll just simplify that by saying, for example, if there are 3 jobs, and Joy knows this really well, if there are 3 jobs that are lost, especially for individuals who are kind of in that perpetual working poverty, 3 jobs that are eliminated, for our numbers, they're going to be masked by the 1 job that Karen's team creates at Ohio Health. And so that's why we say we have to really peel back the numbers. Income tax, if we have positive perception might be we're doing great, we're doing really, really well, but we have to look, are we still creating jobs that are able to be working wage, able to invest in the community, and not letting the success of a lot of the types of jobs that now Mr. Hall and his team are helping to create. And these are the sectors that we're seeing a lot of growth in right now, of course. but you can't have all of the biotech, all of the brilliant stuff that Mr. Scantlin's working on. You can't have all of those incredible high-wage paying jobs being the kind of like the assumption that everyone else is in that same bucket. And so I really, we'll continue to share with you, but I wanted to really kind of hit home on that point, and that's the reason why our social services and some of the things that they're working on are really, really important right now. Actually, the next thing that I wanted to point out is if you turn the page on this deck, I'm going to show you wages, just to illustrate how much wages have changed. Any of you who are in charge of your company's payroll, you know this very, very well. But our wages have really grown in the last number of years. We pulled this together that it starts back again, looking kind of right before COVID hit, so the end of Q1 of 2020, and just look at that change, 30%, 37% in some sectors. And this is for the state of Ohio. Columbus-specific data is both lagging, as well as because regional income tax we collect from the region, people driving in, sleeping in their bedroom communities, driving in, we find some comfort in using the slightly more conservative Ohio wage data. But even then, you can see, again, income tax collections are not a direct correlation to how individuals are doing, because wage inflation has also masked some of that success. And then lastly, I just want to go into a high-level overview of some of the revenues that I know you are getting your arms around to be able to kind of work through your committee charge. The first one is, of course, admissions tax. And with the exception of a very, very small bit of, I think it's a 0.5% fee that we receive, our office receives for collecting this, the city does not have any additional revenue. This revenue comes in, it goes straight out. And so if you turn in your deck to admissions tax on the next page, you'll see a very, very substantial history of the admissions tax. You can kind of tell on the right-hand side, we've provided monthly data because, as you know, it trends to when events are happening and so forth. So we provided the monthly data, but on the right-hand side, you'll see the annual totals. Our office, again, collects this, and if you have any more questions, we'd be delighted to get through those. The next page you'll turn is short-term rentals. And of course, that, began just, our first year of collection was 2019. So you'll see just a brief history of both the collections as well as the beneficiaries of those revenues. I do want to point out that in 2024, our office put forth, along with Mr. Ross and his team, they, as some of you know who serve on Experience Columbus's board, they have a lot of economists. They bring in a lot of extra sets of data. We actually partnered with them to look at some of that disparate kind of data and help our own city licensing section help look and make sure that we were trying to reach as many of the short-term rentals who were not licensed as possible. So there was a little bit of an uptick in revenue. We're in a really good place there, but that occurred in the mid part of 2024 with our office. So I just want to point out that that trend was not so much between 23 and 24, that arguably a lot of additional short-term rentals were added. Instead, we really kind of looked at the doubling down on not so much the enforcement, but making sure people understood that they had a responsibility to both get licensed as well as become compliant with our tax system. And the last but not least is, of course, hotel motel taxes, which we've provided this history as well. And you know what I'd love to do is just say, again, a lot of information. We're going to turn it over to the expenditure side now. But as you work through this, please don't hesitate to just ask questions. We're here, and your brain power it means a lot to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Testing, right? So thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, committee members, and elected officials and all in attendance here today. I certainly appreciate this opportunity to provide an overview of key area investments made by the City of Columbus. And if you'd permit me, just a few opening remarks before I get started. One item to note is that the city doesn't specifically tag expenditures by these key areas. And so what's important about that is we have members of our budget team, some of are in attendance here today, that actually poured over 7 years worth of fiscal expenditure data to try to carve out these specific investments in the key areas. And I want to just thank them quickly. Lynn Beatty, Callie Harris, Adam Robbins, and Kyle Severhart, who really did a lot of data mining here. So appreciate that. My goal for today's presentation is really just supplement what you already heard from Director Telerik and Auditor Kilgore to provide a very high-level overview of the city's key area investments for that 7-year period. As Auditor mentioned, we used the same look-back period, 2018 to 2024, for all the reasons stated by Auditor Kilgore in terms of what was really relevant. We relied on our best interpretation of the underlying data to classify these expenditures. And so we fully expect that this committee is going to have many follow-on questions and need additional information, and we are happy to do that additional data mining. And finally, I've structured my presentation really around 2 large classifications that I sort of made up in my own mind. I know that doesn't give anyone a lot of comfort in here, but I designated and non-designated funding sources. And so Auditor Kilgore just mentioned, right, designated funding sources, which are largely hotel, motel tax and admissions tax, right? But in addition to that, again, as the auditor mentioned, we have non-designated funding sources. And those would be things like the operating budget, our capital budget, federal, state, local grants, COVID relief funding. And so I've got those classified as a separate group. What we'll find, and I think I hope is one of the key takeaways, at least for me, is that you'll see the non-designated funding sources that the city has invested growing over time. And I think as President Hardin mentioned in the last hearing, I think it probably speaks to the latent demand in these 3 key areas that the city has been sort of augmenting over this period. So with that, we can sort of get to the data. I won't belabor this. Auditor Kilgore did an amazing job of the overview, but the 2 designated funding sources that we keyed in on were, of course, the hotel motel tax and the admissions tax. These were both recommendations from FRAC 1.0. Admissions tax was a wholly new tax implemented. We didn't actually start seeing revenues, I believe, Auditor, until 2019, I think. The hotel motel tax was actually reapportioned in response to the first FRAC 1.0. The general fund portion was reallocated across the different categories to, again, sort of augment distribution to the key areas. Collectively, for 2025, these designated funding sources approximate $50 million. Non-designated funding sources, again, are areas where, and Auditor Kilgore mentioned, general fund is the largest portion of this. This is where the city is not statutorily, right, or mandated to allocate certain dollars towards the key areas, but certainly choose to invest in those areas. Major items would be obviously our general fund, grants, which is including our HUD grants from the federal government, our capital program, and our federal COVID relief dollars. No, it's very hard to see, and we won't go over this at length because Auditor Kilgore did an amazing job of going over this. She went through the funding sources, but our 2025 general fund operating budget is a little over $1 billion, largely supported by income tax. Again, a little bit hard to read, but what this slide is meant to convey to the committee is that across all key areas, for 4 different classes of revenue streams, those being hotel, motel, admissions tax, operating, and grants, the city invested almost $76 million in 2023. And that's excluding capital, HUD, federal COVID relief. So that's across all 3 key areas. That number grew to over $92 million last year, again, via those four main funding streams and across all three key areas. And I think what you'll see is the operating and grants portion of that is growing collectively. This shows the investment in the cultural arts key area over time. I think we saw with auditors' data, certainly a downturn, right, with the pandemic. And so what we're seeing is with respect to cultural arts, let me just find my notes here really quickly. We have over $91.5 million investment over this period of time from 2018 to 2024, and 93% of that is coming collectively from hotel, motel, and admissions tax. So this is the one category that's dominated by those designated funding sources in the cultural arts area, with obviously some supplementing by the other funding sources. Human services, the next slide, again, a little hard to read, apologies there, but human services across this 7-year period, over $221 million was invested in human services, with 86% coming from operating and grants. About 50% of human services is supported by the city's operating budget, which is, as you can see, it's that sort of that yellow stack bar section in the middle, and you can see that percentage of total support growing over time. And then finally, travel and tourism over this 7-year period is approximately $93 million the city has invested in this area across those 4 different revenue streams. Again, this one is dominated by hotel, motel, and admissions tax, which represents about 93% of funding for the travel and tourism key area. The next few slides, they represent funding sources that are more flexible in nature. For example, this is not included in the previous grant section. This is our community development block grant. These are HUD dollars that are allocated specifically to the city. They're largely project-based. And as you can see, the vast majority of these go to support human services. It could be in a number of different ways. It can be for supporting services. It can be for operating support. It can be for capital investment to expand capacity. So collectively, there's about $27 million in community development block grant dollars that have been invested in human services sector over this period of time. Next is our federal COVID relief funding. Collectively, the city received approximately $470 million in federal COVID relief. This slide specifically talks to the ARPA program, and $86.4 million was expended for ARPA programmatic investments. And we don't, again, track these specifically by the key areas, but I think the two that really kind of jump out, right, to me certainly, is the youth programming and the human services component. And those are the red sort of pie slices there and the blue. ERA, the city invested $128 million in emergency rental assistance, which of course is all to support housing and housing support. The only differentiation there on the pie chart is we received 2 different allocations from the federal government, ERA 1 and ERA 2. Then, of course, we have CARES. The city received $156 million in CARES funding overall, and 108 of that was invested programmatically. And then finally, the city also invests capital dollars in the key areas. And these obviously would not be operating support, right? But they would be for capital investments with community partners, either to expand capacity or to assist them with, capital improvements just to maintain operations. And so you'll see collectively $86 million invested from our capital budget across the three key areas. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Wow. Thank you very much. That is extremely helpful. Thank you for the information. I'm sure we're all going to be spending a lot of time looking at it. Appreciate the detail. It is very, very helpful. So I'm going to maybe pass things to you, Marshall, to see if we're in a position to consolidate questions. So if you have additional questions, go ahead and submit them. Why don't we try to get through the questions that have come in, and if we have time and there are others that people want to vocalize, we hopefully will be able to get to that. So I'm going to let you go with it, Marshall, please.
All right, that sounds great. So we've only had a few questions come in so far through the QR code. So, feel free to submit them there. Otherwise, we'll open it up here shortly. But the ones that I have received so far would probably be most appropriate for Director Telerik. The first has to do with a request of can the committee be provided with a breakdown of the funding makeup by each sector, which I kind of take to mean, can there be further detail in terms of where dollars within cultural arts, human services, travel, and tourism are specifically going. So yeah.
No, I can definitely provide that. So I think kind of similar to what Chris had mentioned, we kind of went through our expenditures. We do have categories from our our budgetary chart of accounts of social service expenditures. So for our 4 levy-supported agencies and Job and Family Services, we have a specific appropriation control on those dollars that go to nonprofits that are payment supports to individuals. And so that's easy to track. We can provide that supplemental to the committee by agency for those. For our general fund, we have grants for community partnerships and our Veteran Service Commission. So we can definitely break that out as well and provide some examples of the key funders, especially with some of the community partnership grants.
I appreciate that. Also related to the county, we had a question about whether we're currently at the sales tax limit in Franklin County. Kind of related to that, I'll just ask them together. There was also a question about conveyance fee and if we have reached our limit there and whether there is a limit.
So yes, there are limits on both the sales tax and the conveyance fee. So the state allows counties to levy up to 1.5% of the piggyback sales tax, and the county is currently at 1.25%. So there is a 0.25% capacity. In terms of the conveyance fee, there's a $1 mandated state fee, and then the County Board of Commissioners are allowed to add up to an additional $3 per $1,000 of value. Currently, there are $2 that are charged of that permissive conveyance fee. The first dollar is split, 50% goes to the Community Shelter Board, 50% goes to the Affordable Housing Trust. The second dollar has been used for supporting various housing projects that allow developers to draw down the low-income housing tax credits. And so there's a number of projects that have been supported over when that second dollar was initiated a few years ago.
And then we also had a question around federal funding from COVID-related and pandemic relief dollars. Could we clarify for the committee whether those funds are gone at this point and how the city and the county are reacting to that? And general comments around future federal uncertainty would be welcome.
I think in terms of the county funding for the federal, most of our expenditures on emergency rental assistance have been drawn down with our partners. The last payment to Impact Community Action as part of their contract was made earlier this year, and they're drawing those dollars down internally. And then we have a program with Home for Families that they invoice on a monthly basis. And again, those are the last two providers. The allocations we gave to a number of other nonprofits, as well as through our Job and Family Services for our PRC program that was supported by ERA, that was expended at the end of, during last year. With regards to the coronavirus dollars, there was approximately about 35 to 40 million left over going into 2025. You know, those dollars have been obligated and identified for various contractual commitments. And so I think even though in the one chart it did show that it would have 25, 26, it's likely those will be fully expended by the end of 2025.
In terms of COVID relief funding for the city, just in short, all of those funds have been obligated. We fully expect those to be spent down by the deadlines. Just maybe speaking to the funding impact, I think it would just be obviously a concern for community partners. Vast majority of those dollars went out the door to support human services specifically, and so again, I do sort of harken back to something that President Hardin said about these dollars, regardless of funding source, meeting really latent demand rather than expanding capacity. So certainly a concern.
And with respect to the kind of the fiscal changes and what's happening federally, just I guess contextually, and I've spoken to a number of you throughout the last couple of months, this is harder than even early COVID. This is harder. And, for purposes of a couple of things. Number one is, unlike early COVID or after, especially different fiscal events, things like September 11th, there are often this, beautiful opportunity for things like bipartisanship and individuals working together in ways where there's a shared purpose and there's a comfort in that we might not fully agree, but we're going to work towards that next step. And that's not the case today. And so I think the governments across this country that are best positioned are the ones that have enough autonomy and enough ability to kind of create their own destinies in a way that is, it's complicated. I've kind of titled this period right now, Fend for Yourself Federalism. It's something that I've personally never experienced. I've called my predecessor and asked him, and he retired at the right time. He missed COVID. He's missing this. He nailed this timing. But let me kind of express, and I do not. My remarks are exclusively from my role as auditor. I don't want to speak for the administration nor for council. But when I look at the things that keep me up at night right now, I think our city, because of our dedication to our financial management, the fact that your city is the highest rated city in America of our size. And that is a huge accomplishment. And what that basically, allows us to do is we've built in some things that we can kind of pivot. We've built in some management tools where we can tighten our belt a little bit. We can work really hard. I know working with the administration and council, their focus is on our nonprofit community right now. They are super, super committed to helping this create as much stability as possible. And so what I'm suggesting is that we have a really good handle. We have our arms around right now the direct financial impacts as best we can to our city. We've built a dashboard that we're constantly updating, and we're updating it based upon what's happened in other communities. We see something happen, we adjust. S&P, Moody's, Fitch ratings, they've all started making adjustments. This is happening, right? Governments across the country who are affected right now by federal changes are absolutely being affected by rating agencies. What that means is things are going to cost more. You're not going to be able to afford as much. And so for our purposes, we've dashboarded as much as we can just to understand the materiality, the potential risk, and to learn about kind of what's happening around the rest of the country. For the administration, there are jobs tied to the grants that we're receiving. These are real individuals. They're real programs in the community. But the thing that I'm probably myself focused on the most is learning, and I've spoken to a number of you here, what your impacts are because you are our economic stabilizers. And so just consider, for example, that 9 of our 15 largest employers in Columbus are tax exempt. They receive a lot of revenue from the federal government. That revenue keeps individuals employed who are our bedrock. That's our primary source. So that's what I'm really kind of being kept up at night thinking about. And truth be told, the community, we have got great relationships with not just a lot of you here, but your CFOs, and I deeply appreciate that open communication because it allows us to do something enviable, which is to plan. And we will continue every single week monitoring this. Every single Friday at 3 o'clock, we meet, we talk about this. It's the enviable time, Friday at 3 p.m. But we do find comfort in planning as much as we can. And it's hard to say, but, it's not just the direct federal monies coming to us. It's also the things like we've got $5.5 billion of debt, and that's debt that exists. But behind that are water projects and sewer projects and roads. And just think about the uniqueness of a single sewer project. You might be getting materials from 14 different countries. Each one might have a different tariff. So we are trying to do our best just to monitor, to maintain, to understand, to prepare. But it's absent knowing what might change in 3 hours or 3 days or 3 weeks or 3 months. We're just trying to plan as best we can. Please.
Just real quickly, expanding on what Auditor Kilgore mentioned, I think you heard from Mayor Ginther at the last meeting, his concern about the federal grant landscape. The city has several $100 million in federal grant support. The auditor has been an amazing partner in helping us have visibility around that federal grant exposure. And I know the mayor has charged all of us on the administration side to monitor those and, to do our best to clearly live up to and uphold the values that we hold dear, right, while maintaining support for our community partners. So thank you.
And also to follow up as well, I think to Auditor Kilgore's point, the county is one of those employers that has a lot of individuals that are supported with federal funds. There's over 700 employees budgeted at Job and Family Services, where that is primarily federally funded with some local general fund support. Our Child Support Enforcement has over 200 employees. 2/3 of their funding comes from the federal government with the local, between the state and local sources. Children's Services has over 800 employees. They get Title IV funding that covers, their expenses, I believe about a quarter. So again, a lot of our agencies, especially in the Social and Human Service, it's not just the community partners that would be impacted. It is the employees at the county as well.
And if I could just really quick talk on the COVID dollars, because I see a few questions on that. But before I say that, Madam Auditor, I really appreciate your human-centric approach with this behavioral economic strategy in order to analyze the data for many of us. So thank you for that, because folks, and all of you, people don't really understand because all we see is numbers, right? And they call me DCA Cha-Ching, and I don't know why. But I do want to mention quickly just about the COVID dollars. What happened pre-COVID, we had a certain number of folks receiving services. Then during COVID, we received this infusion of dollars and we infused it into our budget. A lot of us did, as if it was going to be a staple. The unfortunate thing about that is those dollars are now gone. And a lot of those dollars, as everyone has articulated where they went, primarily to housing, we have more people now that we're servicing through nonprofits, through government agency than we did pre-COVID. But now those dollars to support a lot of those folks are gone. So we are challenged currently right now at the county in really identifying how many of who really, were these folks here pre-COVID, or did they come on scale post-COVID? And we really won't know that until all of those dollars pretty much are diminished. And that's just, it sounds kind of messy, but my folks are scrambling right now trying to figure out how many of who, and then using predictive analytics on how many folks are going to be in need in the next 3 years.
And we had a few other questions come through that might be a good fit for Auditor Kilgore. The first of which is, what are some of the other taxing areas we could explore? And examples were given such as online gambling transactions, marijuana sales, things of that nature. Kind of an open-ended question.
You know, really the sky's the limit with what is available. A lot of governments across the country would look at what does their economy and what does their business makeup look like? What do the behaviors of that community, kind of suggest would be relevant? Marshall was kind enough to drop in a supplemental reading that I wanted to kind of just share as you're debating and you're kind of, looking at opportunities. It's also about making sure that any revenues that are proposed are really kind of meeting some criteria. And so, for example, will that revenue stream grow with the community, or will it be dormant? And so a very simple example is tying it to something like, in some communities, there have been cable fees. We have had that. It's now a streaming world. That's a very simple example that comes to mind. Another example would be making sure that any type of new revenue that you would consider is administratively not too costly, that it is not an equitable burden. So, for example, there is both kind of vertical equity, meaning it's not going to overly burden a single user or a single population unfairly. And there's also horizontal equity, meaning that, we're able to benefit from residents, arguably people coming in to work, and it's not overburdening a single population of our folks here. Is it politically feasible? And so, there's a whole menu of options, but each one requires some consideration therein. There's also the opportunity, too, of optimizing what we have now. And I really wanted to spend some time on that income tax piece because of that. There are some really big opportunities. Actually, Dr. Bivens and I share a lot of kind of that human-centric. There is incredible opportunities for ROI based upon very intentional investments in our people today.
One thing, when you have a conversation about the different types of revenue options that are available, where revenue capacity exists, I encourage this group to really, at some point, focus in on the current cost of living in Franklin County and in the greater Columbus region, and how that compares with other peer metropolitan counties and cities that we compete against for jobs and continued prosperity, and evaluate those areas that will cause the least stress on our residents as we look at options to provide things on the service end. I'm getting a lot of feedback in that way from the county commissioners, given the number of things that have already come online. For example, the Adam H. levy that will be on the ballot this November. And that levy will be critical due to the fact that we had a Franklin County Crisis Care Center that needs to be fully functional to reach its full potential of what value it's going to provide in the community.
So, everyone, I really appreciate the way you've level set where we are, given that COVID dollars are gone, CARES dollars are gone, ARPA dollars are gone, ERA dollars are gone. Looking at CDBG, those potentially will be gone as well. it will truly impact the social services industry here, not only here in Columbus, but the region and nationally. You know, going through the charts, I think they're extremely helpful in letting us know currently what is being funded and how it is being funded. And I think it helps the committee really look at where we start and what we think about and how creative we are and innovative we are as far as looking at current funding, whether it's admission tax, motel, hotel tax, new sources of revenue moving forward. We are not at the point of looking at what are the solutions. I appreciate those questions right now, but we're truly not there yet, because I don't really think we understand the total impact. We do hear from the nonprofits what they are going through on a daily basis. But we're not hearing necessarily, we don't know what the arts are going through. We don't know what Experience Columbus is going through. I think everyone is burdened financially. And it's really our charge to look at how do we move forward, understanding where the city and county are, and what are the potential opportunities moving forward. So I just want to thank you for this information. It brings a lot of clarity, not only from an operations standpoint, but even from a capital standpoint, because there are a lot of capital needs out there as well.
And we have several other questions that came through that I think we'll be able to address in maybe a rapid fire style approach here. The first has to do with the income tax. This person is asking, are we at our limit for the income tax? And do other entities outside of the city of Columbus have the authority to implement their own income tax?
Yeah, the income tax currently is at 2.5%. That was a request that was made of the voters to increase it from 2 to 2.5% on August 4th. Was it 2009? Yes. And the citizens supported it, which was an incredible testament to their belief in the city of Columbus, because that was on the heels of the double dip recession. Any additional increase would require a vote of the voters. And with respect to the rest of the region, I would say, I think each of you received a digital copy of the popular annual financial report, 16 beautiful pages of everything you wanted to know. But there's a little map in there that will show you the different municipalities around the region. 2.5% seems to be, I think that's fair, looking at Rashida, about 2 to 2.5% is going to be the norm. So there is a lot of parity in the region right now.
Madam Auditor, finer point on that, and I think my question was, is there a cap though set by the state? And I think in a lot of these conversations that we are talking about, we're talking about, I think, climate at the federal level, but we also have, I think, a state house to deal with when we think about potential other sources as well and preemption from them. And so the question was, are we at a max from a legal standpoint? Is there any type of cap that the state has put on that for municipalities or any other agencies?
I will have to turn my request to Rashida Hansard, Division Administrator of Tax. Rashida, do you happen to know that offhand? We'll have to verify that.
We had another question related to income tax. This committee member notes that there was a large increase in the Columbus income tax in 2024. And they ask, what is driving the roughly 35% increase in revenue compared to 2023 in the previous year?
Darlene, any context that you would provide to that outside of just the collections represent the materiality of the kind of the revenue position? Would you add anything?
It was moving that 25% into the general fund.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's an excellent question and excellent point. Who asked that question? Can I ask? Thank you. So excellent question, Mr. Scantlin. We have historically, this goes back to, 1950s, when we set forth kind of this plan to really commit ourselves to be an income tax-driven city. And we started taking a quarter out of every dollar that comes in the form of income tax and setting it aside to be able to commit ourselves to our capital plan. Now, this is not for our public utilities. They largely, as I shared, pay for themselves. But for everything that's not utility, so roads, your sidewalks, your bike lanes, public safety facilities, fire stations, recreation facilities, all of those pretty much non-utility items that are capital, we pay for using a quarter of every dollar that comes in an income tax. And thank you, Darlene, for that recollection. That's a great question. That 25 cents is simply set aside, and that we with the administration, had a change in the way that it was financially reported, basically, for your consumption.
Just a follow-up, should we believe that total revenue that's available is higher in 2025 than that historic trend, or is this sort of a one-time?
Yeah, that was a policy. Yeah, it was a singular kind of change in the financial reporting. Historically, let me kind of answer it with, we've only had 6 years since 48 where income tax has actually declined year over year. And Darlene, I think it was 6 years. I think it's 6 years. You saw the little blip, of course, in early COVID. That really speaks to the success of income tax as being more people moving in, more jobs. Arguably, your revenues are going to continuously kind of grow up. What I will point out is, and this is kind of what Director Bivens and I were speaking to, if you consider the city, kind of put yourselves in our position of understanding our customers who are our residents. They're also our workers. And so, for example, what it costs the city of Columbus to deliver services to an individual like myself. I both live and I work in the city of Columbus. So I'm a 24-hour user, right? Your city's providing services to me 24 hours of the day versus, let's take, I think you're a great example, Mr. Scantlin, where you live outside of the city. So we're really paying for your services just for the 12 hours that you're here during the day. So there is a different component. What I would say is the cost of delivering those services has gone up, and per capita, we're not receiving as much in revenues. So those margins have kind of trimmed. A lot of that has to do, and I'm just curious, I don't want to put you on the spot, Director Bivens, but a lot of it has to do with just we are growing as a big city. And we, as our populations have shifted, and we have a lot more individuals who are kind of working. The same reason why you see the increased social service need is the kind of the same point that I'm getting at. So the quality of those jobs across the entire board. Anything you'd add to that?
No, absolutely. And I would say that, and I think your illustration of when you put up the analytics, looking at the quality of one job versus the I don't want to put it in a negative term, but the quality of another of 3 jobs, right? And so when folks live in Columbus and they work, so I live in Whitehall, but I work in Columbus. You can't count me as a whole, you don't get all the dollars that you would get from a whole person from Columbus, depending on what type of job I have. Depends on how much my taxes are going to be, and that's why, to your point, it's important to invest in people so they can make quality. And I know, I hear you, Trudy, can't get to solutions, but it's important to look at it from a perspective of quality of employment and where folks live. In our growing population, we're at 1.3 million today. We're going to be at 3 million in 15, 20, 30, 2050, 2050. Welcome.
So how is the city utilizing, I know you don't do incentives as much as you used to, but many times you have job growth incentives. How are you utilizing that information as far as estimating what your potential income tax will be?
Yeah, Madam Vice Chair, it's a great question. To be honest, I would need to probably work with Director Stevens and our, Department of Development to get you a really comprehensive answer on that. And I can certainly work between now and the next committee meeting, or just to get you that information to the committee in the interim.
No, I was just curious, with our billion-dollar tower that's going up, as well as the build-out that's happening at Carmenton, just in 2024, we created 1,800 net new jobs. So, and that's going to be over a 10 to 15-year period, that we will continue to have those net new jobs. As you say, hospitals and hospital systems are really where the economic drivers are at this point in time. And how are we really looking at that, not only from a taxing standpoint, but from a partnership resource standpoint as we move forward, particularly looking at what some of the solutions are moving forward.
Vice Chair, one thing that just for like inspiration, and maybe Mr. Banks and you has a finance chair, some commentary on how you look at some of the incentives, but your point is absolutely spot on. And that's the thing with like looking at the job counts, just kind of take this in, we as a city, we lost jobs absolutely into early COVID. We had fewer job numbers, yet because of two things. One, Ohio Health, Ohio State, Nationwide Children's, the fact that a lot of our financial services, our insurance tech, some of you, others in this room, you continued to grow and invest. It masked the fact that we lost a lot of jobs across the city, period. And so, I had personally not seen that before. Wage inflation coupled with the fact that super high wage paying jobs, we lost more jobs, but somehow our revenues, coming out of the pandemic, were 11%.
Yeah, and I think you hit that point, which is it's not about the quantity of jobs anymore. It's really about the quality of jobs. And I think even when we're structuring our economic development deals, we're looking at what is the quality of that job, and not just simply the wage, but also tying our incentives to benefits, retirement, all of these other things as well, because it's not just enough to give someone a paycheck, it's all the other expenses as well that come with that. And so I think for us, it's really honing in on what are those emerging sectors. I think for a while, we were very, very aggressive in the logistics space. That has paid off for us, as you all know, with Rickenbacker and what's happening down there. Now looking at healthcare, biotech, and some of the other industries, I think that's where we're really focused. I think another place that we are also thinking about is when we talk about water and sewer, how are we leveraging that? Because a lot of these newer, particularly around advanced manufacturing, data centers, that development is happening outside of the city limits. And so we don't capture that particular income tax because it's outside of the city limits. But how do we structure deals, which we have with Intel, where we will revenue share that income tax because we are providing the water and sewer to them? And so I think for us, it's more looking at the region as a way of how do we leverage, I think, our ability to make those investments and to capture some of that revenue, because increasingly there are going to be more and more projects that are outside the city limits. And so I think it's really about, again, focusing on quality of the jobs when we talk about incentives.
So we've received a lot of great questions in addition to those that we've raised so far. Our team, given our limited time this morning, is going to put those together and provide responses in writing to the committee. And I know we only have about 6 minutes or so, but I'm going to turn it over to the chair to have any comments and maybe an open discussion with the time that remains.
Well, thank you again to both the city and the county, not only for being here today and sharing information, but also offering to make yourselves available. I am certain we will be speaking with you again, so thank you. Is there any other significant comment or question that anyone has? I ask because I'm just going to dive a little bit into what happens after this. So before I do that, is there anything else? Okay, so we have our next meeting coming up, actually on May 19th, so we're not far away from that right now. That meeting will be one that is going to allow us to focus discussion. So we'll be talking amongst ourselves regarding understanding of our mission, our purpose, what are we here to do, how are we going to go about doing this work. I think we'll also have a lot of good time to talk about whether or not, as we've gotten started with information, do we have what we need to really make good recommendations down the road. I think a lot of people are anxious to get to that conversation, and so just please trust that we're headed there next. And so I think we'll have an opportunity to flush a lot of that out. The second thing is that as we go into meeting again and having that conversation, I would ask as much as possible that you try to bring your conversations here to this table and not out in the community. I know it's difficult. I think all of us are having lots of people want to talk. And while we certainly respect that, I think we also need to be given the opportunity as a group to work together and be clear about how we're going to proceed. So I would ask that you consider bringing your thoughts and comments to the table next on the May 19th. After that meeting, we're going to be hearing directly from a lot of the affected sectors. And I just want to say one particular thing about that. We have incredible people in this community doing incredible work in every single sector that we're going to hear from. It is impossible to hear every single voice. And so obviously we're going to have to make some choices about who we can hear from and hope that they can collectively share information from their particular sector and bring that, representing that opinion to us. When we get into those meetings, obviously they're going to be very specific around certain sectors, so we'll be given an opportunity in those meetings to hear from them, to ask questions, and then we will have some time after their presentation to discuss amongst ourselves. So I just wanted to clarify so you understand the cadence of how we are going to proceed. I think we'll have lots of good time to have conversations. So I appreciate that the first and second meetings have been really about coming and listening and learning, and from here we'll really get into the meat of what we're here to do. I think that is everything that I have. The May 19th meeting will be here again, so thank you to City Council for allowing us to take the space and for all the people at the city who have set us up in this format. I think this works extremely well. Marshall, thank you again to you for all the organizing that you have continued to do, and if everybody's okay using this question format in the future, we'll continue to try to do that, leaving room if we can for verbalized questions as well. That is all that I have for today. I want to thank everybody again. Hopefully we will have a lovely Friday, and I look forward to seeing you on May 19th. Thank you.
How are things?
Not a minute over.